So John Wick Chapter 2 was directed by Chad Stahelski and once again features Keanu Reeves, and it also features people such as Ian McShane, Lawrence Fishburne, Common, and this time around John Wick is retired from his lifestyle. He's now with his new dog, and he doesn't want to be a part of that life anymore. But when someone from his past comes in and asks him to complete a task which he cannot deny, he has to go on this task reluctantly, and he encounters many assassins in the world that he left. So this was a movie that, admittedly, I didn't see back when it came out, I believe in 2017. And I eventually saw it right around the time John Wick 3 came out, and because John Wick 4 is coming out, I figured I'd go back and review this movie, and kind of with the first John Wick movie, I'm actually glad I got to rewatch this again, because John Wick 2 is better than I remember. So, what works about John Wick Chapter 2? Well, first off, the acting is surprisingly really good. Keanu Reeves is really good. He gets a lot of crap for how he acts in a lot of movies. Here, I feel like his acting style kind of does work for the character. He's a lot more, reserved. He's a lot more quiet in this movie. I do think it does work for this movie. Lawrence Fishburne is also really good in this movie too. I kind of like his friendship with Keanu Reeves with John Wick in this movie. I do think that's really good. Common is also really good in this movie too for his brief scene. Ian McShane, I thought he was really good. Ruby Rose surprisingly was really good as well. I don't know if it's because she wasn't really talking, but I thought she was also I thought she was menacing in the movie. I was really surprised by her in the movie. Also, the action is incredible. You can see a lot of the action. It feels a lot more brutal than the first movie. You definitely feel a lot more brutality in this movie than you do in the first movie. You also feel a lot of anger from John Wick in this movie, and I guess it goes back to that whole theory where each movie is supposed to be a stage of grief, where I feel like this one is definitely anger. You can definitely feel that in this movie. And the fights and the kills in this movie are really creative. There's a scene involving a hall of mirrors. That fight was really great. The Keanu versus Common was also really well done, really well shot, and it was really intense. The pencil kill was just absolutely ridiculous, but a lot of fun too. And the action is really great. The cinematography is really well done in this movie too. I think it's better shot than the first John Wick movie, admittedly. And I also think the score is a lot better than the first movie too. And even though, despite it's a lot more brutal and maybe a little bit more angrier than the first movie, I do think the jokes land a little bit better than they do in the first movie. There were times where I was just laughing at various scenes in this movie. And I do like the expansion of this whole universe where, John Wick, it's kind of implied that there's a greater world. Here we get to see a lot of that world, and we kind of get to see like how many people are involved in this organization, how people kind of get into this whole thing. I do think that's really well done, really well handled, and I'm kind of intrigued by this whole world after watching it again. Also, I do like the theme of fear and paranoia that John Wick goes through. He kind of knows what this world is like, but we kind of don't know what this world is like. So it kind of relays back to us a bit about how we should be afraid of this organization and how, how unpredictable this whole plan is. And I do think it's really well done. And also, I kind of equate it to like a modern Western, which I'm not really big on Westerns these days, but you can definitely tell that there is a Western vibe to this movie. Particularly the fact that Franco Nero, who stars in a lot of these spaghetti Western movies, appears in this movie briefly. This movie is a lot of fun for the most part. It is well shot. It is well acted. It is well choreographed, I would say. Is there anything about this movie that I don't really care for? Well, kind of like the first movie. My biggest complaint was that we still don't really know much about John Wick's wife. Kind of the same deal here. We know that, unfortunately she passed away. We know that she gave John the dog in the first movie. We don't know much else about her. I don't even remember her name still. And also, I said that Michael Nyqvist from the first movie was a pretty fun villain. Here, the villain is not nearly as fun. Ricardo Scaramuccio, I believe his name is. I'm definitely mispronouncing that. I feel like he was just not as fun. I just felt like he was kind of a generic villain just for the movie to have a very generic villain. Honestly, the villain from the opening scene of this movie before the credits, he was a lot more interesting and actually tied into the first movie a little bit more. But, oh well, I guess we'll just have to deal with him as the villain. He's not as fun. He's not as interesting. I kind of couldn't care less for him. So, John Wick Chapter 2, I do think overall it's definitely a better movie than I remember. The acting's great, the action's great, the cinematography and score are incredible, the expansion of this world is great, and I do like some of the themes of this movie. I do like the themes of anger in this movie, the fear and paranoia. It's definitely a lot for a movie, but it's definitely intriguing, it's fun, it's a fun and entertaining movie overall. Even though I don't really care much for the villain, and I also don't really think there's a lot for John Wick's wife in this movie. I still think it's a good time, especially if you enjoyed the first movie. This is one of those franchises I think gets better and better, and John Wick 3, I'm so excited to talk about that. So, I'll give John Wick Chapter 2 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what'd you think of John Wick Chapter 2? Also, what's your favorite movie from a John Wick movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.